Hi, and welcome to Sarah and Mike's Best Picture podcast. I'm Michael Cole, and this is episode number 17. This week we're going to be talking about the film Mrs. Miniver, which came out in 1942. This film stars Greer Garson, Walter Pidgeon, Teresa Wright, Henry Travers, Dame May Whitty, and Richard Ney, and it was directed by William Wyler. It won Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Actress in a Leading Role, Greer Garson, Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Teresa Wright, Best Director, and Best Writing Screenplay. It was also nominated for Best Actor in a Leading Role, Walter Pidgeon, Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Henry Travers, Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Dame May Whitty, Best Sound Recording, Best Film Editing, Best Effects, and Best Special Effects. Best Effects, Special Effects. That's a specification. It was the first film to receive acting nominations in all 4 acting categories. It's actually one of only 2 Best Pictures that have ever done that, the other being 1953's From Here to Eternity. It beat out for Best Picture 49th Parallel, King's Row, Random Harvest, The Magnificent Ambersons, The Pied Piper, The Pride of the Yankees, The Talk of the Town, Wake Island, and Yankee Doodle Dandy. With me, as always, is my co-host and wife, Sarah.
Hello.
So what did you think of the movie?
I really liked it a lot.
Yeah.
It was... beginning, I wasn't really sure if I was gonna like it. But, pretty quickly, I changed my mind.
Right. Yeah, I thought at the beginning it wasn't clear. Wasn't clear exactly if there was going to be a story, and what, it seemed a lot like just a bunch of random things happening at the beginning, but it quickly came together, and I thought it was really good.
Looking back on the beginning now, I kind of get it.
Yeah.
Like, their life was, very... not to, simplify it too much, but they were just a little carefree.
Right.
The first thing you see Mrs. Miniver do is get, this hat that she's gone back for and made a special trip for, because she's like, right. I have to have it, and they kind of make a big deal out of the hat, and by the end of the movie, you're like, this clearly was, to show people, how much the war, the tragedies of war.
Yeah. So, this is the first real, I know that they kind of mentioned it a little bit before this, but this is the first World War II Best Picture winner. And the movie started filming about a month or 2 before the U.S. involvement in the war. But it was, it's the first time we're really seeing the war. And it's the British war, not, the British side of the war, not the U.S. side. But basically the movie tells the story of Mrs. Miniver and her family, who are living in England at the beginning of the war, and at this point when they made the movie, the war had really just begun. There had been very little other than what they showed in the movie. There had been very little that had happened as far as British involvement. One of the things that we see in the film is we see her husband go. Her son's in the military. He's in the Air Force, but we see her husband go out on a boat with a bunch of the other men and children, and there may have been women. They don't show any women in this, but they went to Dunkirk on their boats to go take. I think they said there was 400,000 soldiers stranded in Dunkirk because the Navy couldn't get the proper ships in to take them out, so they were sending personal cruise vessels over, basically. So we see that, and then we see the bombings. We see them going, the air raid sirens, and them going into their bunkers and their basements and everything else. And so that is essentially what the war is at this point, when they made the movie, and that's what we see.
Yeah.
The movie though is good about, I think, kind of showing us, like you said, it shows us how they kind of lived a charmed life prior to the war. It does show us how that life interweaves with the war. Basically, we get to see. So the beginning, after you said the hat thing, Mrs. Miniver comes home on the train, and there's this man played by Henry Travers. He is most famous for playing Clarence the Angel in It's a Wonderful Life. He plays the station manager of the train station, who has grown a rose that he's going to be entering into their town's flower festival or whatever. And he wants to name it after her. He wants to name it the Mrs. Miniver, because she is so nice and checks in with him every time she comes through, and she's just like a nice woman, and she's kind of like the ideal. She is beautiful, kind, brave, compassionate. Like, she is the ideal character, and so the rose, he sees that and wants to name the rose after her. Throughout the film, we get to see all those different aspects kind of come out of her. We see her at one point. Her son is going to marry the grandniece or granddaughter of the woman who is competing in that flower contest against the Mrs. Miniver, and we see Mrs. Miniver go, talk to her about their children getting engaged, and she persuades her, very sweetly persuades her that, you just gotta let it happen. They're in love, and it's wartime, and this is crazy emotional time, but it needs, it's what they need at this point because of everything that's going on. And then we see her. At another point in the movie, when her husband's off trying to go to Dunkirk, she sees she is held at gun point by a German soldier who demands milk, and then she manages to get the gun away from him and calls the police, and he gets him taken away. Although she's very compassionate, I think, even with him. Like, she doesn't obviously want to. She doesn't respect the fact that he's holding a gun to her, but he's injured, and she, after she's taken the gun and calls the police, she kind of is like, well, let me take care of you. Let me straighten things out and before the cops get here, so that you're a little bit in better shape, because he's got kind of a mangled arm from some kind of, we don't know if it's a plane crash or fighting or what, but so we kind of see all these different aspects of her, and she's, I would say, she won the best actress, best leading actress in this year, and I totally get it. Without having seen the other performances, she's amazing. In the performance, you get to see these little nuanced looks that she gives of fear, and she manages to balance, you can see that she's, afraid but staying strong and doing all these things, and she's really amazing in it.
Yeah.
The scene, so after the scene with the German, her husband comes home from Dunkirk, and he goes up to bed and sleeps, and she says something about him sleeping for 10 hours after breakfast, because he said, when did I ask for breakfast? And she said that was 10 hours ago, and then you passed out. And they talk, and he's talking about how he's like, I'm kind of proud of myself, and not in a way that's really boastful, but in he's like, he realizes that he did, he's a middle-aged man and he went and did something that was important, and he gets that. And so he's not being like, braggy at all, but he says that, and then he says, I guess that's kind of what we're supposed to do, what us men are supposed to do. We go off and take care of, things while you stay home and take care of the home. And she goes, yes, dear. And this is like later in the day when she had a German hold her up at gunpoint. And so she's like, yes, dear. Yeah, uh-huh. And she's like very, she's not talking down to him. She's like very earnest in that feeling. And then the maid comes in and mentions the German, and she tells him, and it's really cute the way they interact about that, because he's like, you were going to let me go on and on about this when you were, being brave and doing stuff here too. And like he like spanks her really hard, and like,
yeah,
in like a kind of like, not in like a kinky sexual way, but in like a flirty way. And and like it the nuance of the performance, I think, is incredible.
Yeah, I would agree.
So does anything else particularly stand out to you about the movie?
I think they really did a good job of making you like really fearful when, especially the scene where they're, the first scene where they're first in the bomb shelter with the kids, you feel for like how scary that must have been when the bomb shelter is like literally, moving.
That's another scene that I think plays into a lot of nuance with the fact that they have to be playing scared while also playing brave for their kids.
Yeah.
And that's going to be in real life, doing that has to be like incredibly difficult, but in pretending to be scared while pretending to be brave, while it's a hard balancing act.
Yeah. But for me, the scene that was like most on the edge of my seat was definitely the when they're in the car and it's just Miss Miniver, well, both Miss Minivers at that point.
Yeah. Mrs.
Yeah. It's that scene is just, I felt like awful for them.
Yeah. At that point, so Mrs. Miniver is in the car with her daughter-in-law. They've been married for, I think, less than 2 weeks at that point.
Yeah.
And the son/husband has gone off to something, and they hear a plane crash in the distance while they're being driven home, basically. And they just left him, half hour or whatever it's supposed to be beforehand, and they don't know if it's him or not. They don't know if he just died, and it's interesting the way they play it, because the new wife is upset, but she's not upset in the same way, because she's known the guy for all of like 5 or 6 meetings, like, as far as we can tell. Like they have not known each other long, so she's upset, but she's also like having to console her mother-in-law, who obviously gave birth to and raised this kid, and so like it's a different thing. And that scene is gut-wrenching.
Yeah. And then
and they don't even know if he's alive.
And when they look when Mrs. Miniver looks at the roof of the car and sees the gunshot holes, like, that was just like I thought like an incredible scene. Yeah. Like, she realizes that she could have been shot. She was just like very narrowly missed. Yeah. It's just yeah. That stood out probably the most to me.
Yeah. I also liked there were I think that some of the stuff that kept it grounded for me, and that kept it like it could have easily just been, this is all World War II. And what they didn't do was, the scenes that weren't, directly related to the war were to show us that life goes on even during the war,
like
and that it gets interrupted. But the rose competition was a beautiful scene where this woman has been grumpy and like unwilling, and she doesn't want even the guy to enter the contest, let alone the possibility of him winning. And Mrs. Miniver says, he's really wanted it for, really badly, and if you were to talk to the judges, they may turn the ruling around. And she had just won. The woman had just won, and she says to Mrs. Miniver, whenever you look at me like that, I can't help but change my mind. And she gets up on stage, and she declares that he's the winner, and she says all these nice things about him, and it's a beautiful scene. And then, it's nice. This movie's more than 75 years old. So until we get to like the 2000s, there no spoiler alerts on this show. Everything's going to be spoiled. Yeah. But right after the rose thing, there's an air raid siren, or the air raids, and so they're all supposed to go off. And after the aftermath of that round of bombings, we find out that man died like 20 minutes after receiving the cup. So like it was this thing that he had really wanted the entire movie, and the woman had wanted to deny him the entire movie, and then she finally let him have it, and he got to have it right before he died. And so that was like beautiful, and it was beautiful before you knew that he was, because you don't know he's going to die or even think he's going to die until they say that he died. So it's not even like there's no anticipation of that, but it's just an incredibly beautiful, touching, sweet moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few things of trivia I want to read. And then I kind of think we should end this early just because, in case you can't tell, my voice is going. So I think we should end early tonight. All right, so a few pieces of trivia, actually quite a few pieces. So in the first thing that's interesting is Greer Garsons plays Mrs. Miniver, and the son that gets married, we talked about, that character is played by an actor named Richard Ney, and they were married right after this movie was made, about a year after. There is a speech at the end of this movie that right after after all these deaths in the bombings, after that guy in the rose ceremony and everybody else died that's gonna die in the movie, there's a speech at church the vicar gives, and apparently President Roosevelt ordered that it be broadcast on the Voice of America, and copies of it were dropped over Europe as propaganda. And it's an incredible speech. I will see if we can find a link to it and link it in the show notes for this week. But it's a really good speech about the why this war is so different, and especially being that England hadn't been in the war for very long when the movie was made, and America was not necessarily even in the war when they shot that scene. It's a very powerful speech. Winston Churchill once said that this film had done more for the war effort than a flotilla of destroyers. Actually, this movie, most of the trivia is kind of just about the impact of the movie itself on the war. William Wyler openly admitted that he wanted to make it for propaganda reasons. He was a Jew born in Germany, and he really wanted the U.S. to enter the war against Nazism, and they hadn't when he started working on it.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. After completing the movie, William Wyler joined the U.S. Army and was posted to the Signal Corps. He was overseas on the night that he won his first Oscar for this. interesting. One of the more interesting things is, so you expect like Churchill and Roosevelt to kind of talk about a movie on this side, but Joseph Goebbels, who was the Nazi propaganda minister, wrote that Mrs. Miniver shows the destiny of a family during the current war, and its refined, powerful propaganda tendency has up to now only been dreamed of. There is not a single angry word spoken against Germany. Nevertheless, the anti-German tendency is perfectly accomplished. So, like, that guy was amazing at propaganda. He made some of the, most, unfortunately, the most most effective propaganda in history, and he thought this movie was better than anything he did, which is kind of an interesting piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of skip the last couple pieces of trivia. They're not particularly interesting. Oh, I guess this one. At the time that Greer Garson won her Best Actress Oscar, her speech was 5.5 minutes, which was the longest on record at that time. It didn't say whether or not that's currently the record. But as you can hear, my voice is going, so I'm going we're going to sign off early tonight. We will be back next week, maybe a little bit late because we're going to be doing some traveling starting tomorrow for about a week. But at some point next week, we're going to be doing Casablanca. I'm really excited to do Casablanca because it's obviously one of the big ones. Yeah. So if you have seen it, or if you want to see it, or you can go ahead and rewatch it, please do so, and let us know if email us or message us or whatever. You can email me at mikediamond82984@gmail.com and let us know if you have any trivia or interesting pieces of information about the movie for us to talk about. We had a new Back to Film School episode on our YouTube channel this week. And we will be having a new short film out in a couple of weeks. Other than that, I think that's
everything.
about it. So, yeah, tune in next week for Casablanca.